Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum here at the Kennedy School of Government. I'm David Elwood. I'm Dean of the Kennedy School, and it's my very, very great honor to welcome United States House of Representatives Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi here to the Kennedy School. This afternoon, Leader Pelosi met with something like 60, but I counted them coming up. I think it was 120 Kennedy School women students who aspire to run for office and who have been chosen to participate in a special program that we've recently developed called the Kennedy School's Women and Public Policy Programs is created this program called From Harvard Square to the Oval Office. This Oval Office program trains women who are going to run for public office, and we're certainly proud of this. Obviously, the goal is straightforward. We have to find a way to fill the political pipeline and eventually close the gap, the gender gap that's present in United States electoral politics today and ultimately in the world. Now, Leader Pelosi's discussion with our students was dynamic and exciting, I am told, since I was not a student who aspired to be run for political office at this moment. And she talked about her political philosophy and her own work and aspirations and successes really will serve as a guide for them in running their campaigns. Certainly, the full participation of women in all levels of government, in all ways, is absolutely central to the functioning and efficacy of democracy in the 21st century. So I'm just about done, I'm happy to say. I want to, in a moment, I'm going to invite one of the participants in this program, Jema Adams, who's a second-year student, master's public policy student, and she's from California, and she was a former staffer for then Congresswoman Pelosi's leadership office, and she's going to introduce our guest. But before doing that, I do want to acknowledge three people who have been absolutely central to this all happening. Barbara Lee, thank you for your steadfast leadership and support, not just for the Oval Office program, but for things throughout the year and throughout my history here at the Kennedy School. We go back a long time. Joanne Angerman, I'm also grateful for your demonstrated leadership and all you've done, and particularly to Victoria Budson, who was the founder of this program, worked with these others to make and create this program, which we think will have a demonstrably positive effect on governance in the 21st century. Let's give these three women a good time. Enough from me. Jema.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dean Elwood, and thank you for your support of the Women in Public Policy programs from Harvard Square to the Oval Office program. And Leader Pelosi, among the hundreds of students here today, you have in front of you 60 women who have been brave enough to say, I'm not willing to wait for someone else to do it for me. I'm going to run for office, and I'm going to change the things that I want to see changed. Hooray! Now, since I can remember, I've wanted to be President of the United States of America. And we dream big in my family. In fact, now both of my little brothers also want to run for president. And being part of the From Harvard Square to the Oval Office program has been an opportunity to share these aspirations and to learn from women who have literally changed the world. Just this year in the forum, the Women in Public Policy program has brought powerhouse women like Wangari Maathai, Nobel Peace Prize winner and Member of Parliament from Kenya, as well as Debbie Stabenow, the United States Senator from Michigan. And we've also had more intimate events with campaign experts and fundraisers and local and statewide elected officials. But every conversation has combined inspiring stories of great successes as well as those failures. And as Dean Elwood reminded us on Wednesday night, if you've never failed, you haven't reached far enough. Our speaker today, Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, has reached farther than most people on this planet. She is the first woman to lead a major political party and is the highest-ranking woman in congressional history. But those were only two of the reasons why it was such a privilege to work in Leader Pelosi's office. As the newly elected leader, I watched as she chose a leadership team strategically and inclusively by giving less experienced members of Congress a chance at a leadership position. She developed future talent. And I was lucky to learn from such a smart and passionate woman with something to say to the world. She is equally comfortable speaking on the House floor as on The Daily Show, teaching Jon Stewart a thing or two about politics, as she did this past Wednesday night. If you missed the interview, check it out online. She was fantastic. Leader Pelosi has always been active in politics, but she sought elective office first when a good friend, another woman, asked her to run and not wait for someone else to do it for her, but to make the change herself. In only 6 weeks, and in her usual whirlwind style, she gathered her team, built a grassroots campaign from scratch, and won the election hands down. To all that she does, Leader Pelosi brings an unmatched energy and talent. She has continuously been a courageous advocate for her constituents and the causes that she believes in. Leader Pelosi is here today as the leader of the Congressional Democratic Party to tell us more about the innovation agenda. It is appropriate that an innovator like Nancy Pelosi should be introducing such a bold and ambitious agenda that includes investment in education, job training, and developing technology for our workforce. Recently, she held the Congressional Democrats together in an important vote against the budget reconciliation bill that gave $70 billion in tax cuts while cutting food stamps, health care for the poor and the elderly, and student aid. And she bravely called the bill what it was. The Republicans are taking food out of the mouths of children to give tax cuts to America's wealthiest. This is not a statement of America's values. The world needs visionary leaders and new ideas. We are very fortunate to have both here today in Nancy Pelosi. It is my pleasure and my honor to introduce the woman I was proud to serve and will be proud to call Madam Speaker next fall. Please welcome Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jema. Thank you for your kind introduction. It's wonderful to see you again. As was mentioned by the Dean, Jema was part of our leadership office and our press office in Washington, D.C. It's in the United States Capitol. It's great to see her here. Jema, we're all very, very proud of you, and I think all of you know why, having heard Jema speak. Thank you, Jema, very much. Thank you, Dean Elwood, for your hospitality here today, and more importantly, for your great leadership to our country when you served on the Department of Health and Human Services under President Clinton. Thank you, Dean. Let's hear it for the Dean. And Governor Shaheen, thank you so much for the invitation to be here and for upholding the mission of the Kennedy School to build a bridge between the academic study of government and the daily activity of politics. No one understands it better than you. No one could do this job better. Congratulations to Governor Jane Shaheen. I want to take the opportunity to recognize my former colleague, Congressman Martin Frost of Texas, who's now part of the Kennedy School. Martin Frost, here's Martin right here. And to acknowledge also the president, I said, Bob Graham. Bob Graham. Here with Adele. Wonderful to see you. I also want to join Dean Elwood in acknowledging Barbara Lee and Victoria and Joanne Eggerman for their leadership, and also to acknowledge Swanee Hunt, who was so much a part of setting up the women's program here. So once again, let's hear it for the women. When we have a woman in the Oval Office, and hopefully that will not be soon, let me say right off, my aspirations stop at the Speaker's office. When we do have a woman in the Oval Office, it will be a large measure because of the work of these women. Thank you so much. We're all in your debt. I just had a wonderful experience from the Harvard Square to the Oval Office program. I learned a lot from these young women. They're ready. They are ready to take responsibility. I'm so energized and inspired by them. So I'm very much enjoying all aspects of this visit. But I came here today to talk to you about our innovation agenda. 2 weeks ago in Washington, on behalf of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, I unveiled an innovation agenda, a commitment to competitiveness to keep America #1. It is indeed appropriate to talk about innovation here today because Massachusetts has always been a source of so much independent thinking and innovation. All Americans are inheritors of that great tradition. The United States owes its very existence to entrepreneurial ideas. Our founders had confidence that they were part of change in the world, and they had great faith in the future. That confidence and their faith in the future was reflected on the Great Seal of the United States. They had this engraved in the Great Seal shortly after the Declaration of Independence. It said, "Novos Ordo Seclorum," a new order for the centuries. Imagine the vision, the confidence that they had, a new order for the centuries. In establishing that order, our founders broadened our horizons, expanded our country, and imagined a better world. They also recognized that it is the responsibility of each generation to make America a better place for the next generation, for our posterity. It was in that tradition and with the same confidence in the future, imagination, that President Kennedy, for whom this great institution is named, challenged our nation to set our sights even higher than before. As President Kennedy said in committing our nation to putting a man on the moon, he said, "The vows of this nation can only be fulfilled if we are first, and therefore we intend to be first." Our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to each other require that we make the effort to do so. In answering President Kennedy's call to leadership in science and industry, America built the world's most vibrant economy, became the world leader in scientific discovery and invention. World economic and innovative leadership have continually been defined by American genius. Every advance ever thought impossible was achieved by Americans, splitting the atom, landing a man on the moon, mapping the human genome, and transmitting information around the world in an instant. Each of these discoveries and inventions launched new industries, created new jobs, and triggered even further innovations. We promoted an entrepreneurial culture, creating the most powerful public-private partnership the world had ever seen by investing in long-term, high-risk ideas. All of these factors made America the breeding ground for the innovations and inventions that increased our prosperity, enhanced our lives, and protected and advanced our freedoms. That dynamic and virtuous cycle of innovation is what secured our status as world leader, and that status has remained unchallenged until now. Today, the world has changed dramatically in ways that pose unprecedented challenges to our economy. The underdeveloped country of yesterday is the formidable challenger of tomorrow or even today. Those countries are following what has always been the United States blueprint for decades and which resulted in our preeminence. As others have copied our blueprint, we have departed from it. They are investing heavily in improving their educational systems and creating world-class universities, particularly in science and technology. We have fewer students studying math and science and fewer qualified teachers of math and science than we need. We will graduate 70,000 engineers this year. India will graduate 350,000 engineers, and China will graduate 600,000 engineers. You've heard those figures over and over, I'm sure. They are making a commitment to long-term research and development. We are allowing our commitment to falter. Our federal support of basic research peaked in 1987 and has been flat or falling ever since. They are utilizing cutting-edge technologies to propel themselves forward. South Korea is an incubator for new innovation and is number one in terms of broadband penetration. We are now number 16th in the world, 16th in the world in broadband penetration. Even if the United States were following our blueprint for success, we would still be facing these challenges. But we aren't, and that only compounds the problem. Democrats believe that together America can do better. That is why, over the past several months, we sought out the best possible thinking on how to secure America's place as the world's leader in innovation. We went outside of Washington, D.C., and met with leaders and CEOs from many fields of academia, venture capital, and entrepreneurs from high-tech, biotech, and telecommunication sectors who are creating the jobs of tomorrow. We held forums with these leaders here in Boston, in Silicon Valley, in Washington State, in Chicago, in Northern Virginia, and the Research Triangle in North Carolina, and we will hold more. In fact, we had one more yesterday in New York. In each of these forums, my colleagues and I were invigorated by the freshness of the participants' thinking and the depth of their commitment to the future. They took pride in the amazing history, power, and creativity of America's economic model and the inventiveness of the private sector. Many credited their success to the public investment in education, in infrastructure, in university research, and institutes like the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, and DARPA. But they warned that the commitment of the public sector has not kept pace with America's challenges from abroad. That is why Democrats have challenged the Congress and the country to renew our commitment to public-private partnerships, to secure America's continued leadership in innovation and unleash the next generation of discovery, invention, and growth. In addition to laying down the challenge, we also laid out a series of specific goals, plans, and timelines that, taken together, chart a clear path to a new era of American leadership and prosperity. Our agenda is divided into 5 broad categories. First, we recognize that in a globalized, knowledge-based economy, America's greatest resource for innovation and economic growth resides in America's classrooms. To create a new generation of innovators, our agenda calls for a qualified teacher of math and science in every K through 12 science and math classroom. And we issue a call to action to engineers and scientists to join the ranks of America's teachers. We will add 100,000 new scientists. In addition to those already in the pipeline, we will add 100,000 new scientists, mathematicians, and engineers to America's workforce in the next 4 years by providing scholarships, other financial assistance, and private sector opportunities to college students to achieve this goal. Second, we recognize that independent scientific research provides the foundation for innovation and future technologies. Our agenda will double federal funding for basic research and development in the physical sciences and promote the public-private partnerships that will translate new ideas into marketable technologies. For example, grants from the National Science Foundation have funded breakthroughs from everything from the internet to fiber optics to nanotechnology. We commit to doubling this commitment. In addition, we pledge to modernize and make permanent the research and development tax credit. These investments will allow us to pursue the long-term trailblazing research that gives rise to new advances, spawns new industries, and creates new jobs. Third, we recognize that nationwide deployment of high-speed, always-on broadband and internet and mobile communication will fuel the development of millions of new jobs in the United States. Our agenda guarantees that every American will have affordable access to broadband within 5 years. Universal broadband will propel advanced internet applications such as distance learning, health IT, video on demand, and voice over IP. Universal broadband, whether it's delivered by Wi-Fi or WiMAX or hardline, will put all Americans, no matter where they live, no more than a keystroke or a mouse click away from the jobs and opportunity broadband both creates and supports. As one young technology leader told me at one of our meetings, if you think you've seen what broadband can do, you ain't seen nothing yet. Fourth, we recognize that only innovation and technology can lead to America's energy independence. We should be spending America's energy dollars in the Midwest and not in the Middle East. It is vital to both our economic future and our national security that we develop clean, sustainable energy alternatives, such as bio-based fuels, as well as new engine technologies for fuel flex, hybrid, and biodiesel cars and trucks. To accelerate this work, we propose a new initiative within the Department of Energy that develops high-risk, high-reward, revolutionary energy technologies. Our goal is energy independence, and we intend to achieve it in 10 years. Thank you. Thank you. Fifth, Democrats recognize the need to create a competitive small business environment for innovation. The evolution of an idea to a small business and then ultimately into an entrepreneurial success has been the spark for the technological revolution in our country and will be the key to continued job growth for the future. Therefore, our agenda calls for affordable health care, which has been an obstacle to competitiveness, small business financial support and technical assistance, and reduced regulation. Essential to our preeminence is the protection of our intellectual property. Our agenda commits to protecting intellectual property of American innovators worldwide. These commitments, taken together, represent a democratic decision for the future. There will be those who will say we can't afford to make these investments in education and research, in broadband, in energy independence, in small business success. Democrats believe we can't afford not to. We have no choice. These are critical priorities for our nation. We intend to submit them to the rigors of pay-as-you-go budgeting so they will not add to the deficit, but instead will grow our economy. We know that America's leadership will be secured by those who operate on the frontier of knowledge discovery. From the beginning of our nation, that frontier has been aggressively expanded by America's young people, who are not wedded to old ways of thinking or daunted by the encumbrances of the past or even the present. For example, when I suggested to Google co-founder Larry Page that our goal in the agenda was to have broadband throughout America within 10 years, he said, 10? Why not 2? So you will see in our agenda, we have say within 5 years. We wanted to be sure we could keep the promise. He was sure we could. You'll see that our agenda sets within 5 years of that goal, as I said, but the energy, imagination, and I say with admiration, disruptive thinking of America's young people is propelling us into the future. To the young people here today, and there's so many of you here, know your power. Women also have been an important part of pushing that frontier, but their creative disruption has only been more obvious in recent decades. Yesterday, as many of you know, marked the 50th anniversary of Rosa Parks refusing to be refused. Because of her act of courage, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. launched the Montgomery bus boycott, which unleashed the civil rights movement very significantly in our country. Rosa Parks changed the face of America. To the women who are here, I say to you, know your power. And if you're young and you're women, you have all the power in the world to make a tremendous difference, not being wedded to old ways of thinking. A magnificent disruptor himself, Reverend Martin Luther King, in a speech entitled The the birth of a new age, reminded us, quote, now this was a long time ago, but he said this, through our scientific means, we have made the world a neighborhood, and now the challenge confronts us through our moral and spiritual means to make it a brotherhood. The challenge we face at the beginning of the 21st century is to unite technology with our humanity, to ensure that our newest technologies advanced our most cherished values. Moving America forward and bringing America together. Those are two great challenges of our time and of your generation. Our innovation agenda is part of our vision for a stronger America. It is aimed at our common future. It is a democratic commitment to America, and it is an agenda that reflects our most basic conviction that working together for the common good, there is no challenge too great for the American people. Because of the spirit, optimism, and ingenuity of the American people, Democrats believe that together America can do better. This is our promise to the future. Again, as President Kennedy said, the vows of this nation can only be fulfilled if we are first, and therefore we intend to be first. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leader Pelosi. We now have time for some questions. There are microphones located here, another one up here, a third one there, and one here. And just a couple of reminders about questions. Those of you who are frequently at the forum are sick of hearing me say it. Nonetheless, a good question has three characteristics. Number one, it starts with a mention of who you are. Number two, it has one question and it is short. And number three, it ends with a question mark. So with that, let's start right here.
Thanks. I'll try to stick to the rules, but Leader Pelosi did remind us to begin being disruptors as soon as possible.
Right.
My name is Rebecca Hargraves, and I'm in the Oval Office program. Thanks so much for coming to speak with us today. I'm also a member of your district, born and raised, and hoping to get back and begin my political career in local government there. My question is specific to San Francisco. There are a lot of major issues there, from the housing crunch to economic development and innovation, as well as things like reclaiming urban wastelands like Hunters Point and disasters preparedness. Which of all these types of issues do you think are the most important to the success of San Francisco? And how can I, as a new participant in the local political scene, begin tackling those issues?
Well, I hope that all of you are interested in San Francisco, but I think my response would apply to wherever you live. Our first responsibility as elected officials is to protect the public safety of the people in our jurisdiction. So the homeland security, the security and safety, whether it's law enforcement or homeland security or protecting us from natural disasters that we are prone to from time to time in the Bay Area, is a responsibility that has to come first because the protection of the people is first, and then the economic security and well-being of the people there. So I think a leadership role is about how we protect the people, how we provide for their security, whether it's their physical security, their economic security, their health security, their education, the education of their children. It's a national agenda, really, not really specific to California, but one that is about the core values of our country. I don't think there's anything partisan about them at all. We feel that we're very blessed in the Bay Area, and I know that you think you are here too, and indeed you are. Every member of Congress thinks he or she represents the most beautiful district in America, and we all do. But I would say that when a new mayor is coming along in San Francisco, I always say to them, make sure you have your men and women in blue, the police and fire, and your emergency services lined up, because that's where the people need you. Then know your budget very well so that you're making decisions that are fiscally sound and good investments in the future for the city, and that involves the healthy education and the economic growth of the city. And of course, for us, the environment is an ethic there. It's not an issue, it's a value, it's an ethic. So we want to do it in the greenest possible way so that we are a model to the rest of the country. Thank you.
Very good. Right up here.
Well, thank you for your comments.
Thank
My
you.
name is Herman Sood. I'm with the medical school. But I would like to just support the push for improved science and technology. But I don't see the feasibility of doing this with our present deficit that's going and our problem in Iraq. And my question to you is, why is it that the Democrats are not objecting to this clothing of our present administration with an ideological good intention of bringing democracy to the Middle East? From my perspective, it is transparently obvious that we went there for oil and oil only. There's no way that I think a sensible person could say that our government is concerned about democracy. We have on our record bombing the Al Jazeera office in Baghdad.
Your
and Kabul.
question?
My question is, why do the Democrats support this cloaking of what we're doing in the Middle East as an ideologically desirable thing?
Well, let me be clear about my own record on the subject. When it comes to war, just so you all know, when it comes to issues that relate to war, there's usually not a party position. This is a personal decision that people make. It's not like other issues where you try to do the pros and cons and persuade people to one point of view or not. It's a vote that is very much a part of who the member is. I myself have objected to the war from the start. I, as the senior Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, voted against the war, and I'm very proud that Senator Graham, as the senior senator on the Intelligence Committee, also voted against the war. Senator Graham. Protecting the American people, as I responded to the previous question, is our first responsibility. But we did not see the war in Iraq as the place that would make the American people safer, make our military stronger to protect us in cases of other threats to our security. And in fact, I didn't think it would bring stability to Iraq, and indeed it has not. So I have spoken out quite bluntly on it, but there isn't, you're right, there isn't a party position. I mentioned to some of the young folks here that earlier today, we were at a meeting with Congressman John Murtha, who has put out an initiative to talk about how we pull troops out of Iraq, put them over the horizon to protect our interest in the region and our friends there, as well as deter any threat of terrorism to the American people. That would be done in a way that removes us as a target in Iraq, but keeps our presence someplace nearby to protect our interest. Mr. Murtha has received tremendous support throughout the country on this. He's a 37-year veteran of national security on the front line, 37 years in the Marines himself, 7 active, 30 reserve. So again, the party doesn't have one position on the war, but we are united in one respect. We believe that the course of action that the president is on is not the correct one, and that the president is digging a hole and it's time for him to stop digging there. Now, having said that, I get back to your basic question about, I think it was your basic question, about science and math and how we pay for it. It's a battle of priorities. And what we are saying as Democrats is we will fight for these priorities. This is our decision. We must have these scientists, mathematicians, and engineers in order to have the innovation that our country needs to be number one. And again, we will fight for these. But it's hard in a time when the budget deficit is big, where we have enormous war costs, $250 billion, more than $250 billion already. So it's about priorities. That's what elections are about too. So maybe when we come here and talk politics one day, we can talk about the elections and how that would change our budget priorities in the Congress of the United States.
Right up here.
Hi, Leader Pelosi. Thank you for being here. My name is Kelly Ward, and I'm a second-year Master's in Public Policy student here and also a member of the Oval Office program. And it's wonderful to hear you talk about innovation and innovative ways that government can solve our most pressing problems. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about how your plan encompasses those social entrepreneurs who are on the ground right now in their communities using innovation and entrepreneurship and market-based models to handle these problems at the local level?
Well, your question is an interesting one, and that's why when I spoke in Washington, I didn't talk about Martin Luther. I just talked about the provisions of this proposal. But my thinking on the subject is broader, and that's why I talked about Martin Luther King many years ago, talking about technology and community, because we must bring the two together. Right here at MIT a few years ago, I don't know if it's doctor, but Michael Dertussos, he wrote in his book, "The challenge before us at the dawn of the 21st century is to embark upon the unification of our technology and our humanity." And what you are talking about is so very, very important. And I think almost easier to achieve than some of the initiatives that will take a lot more money. But I commend you for what you're doing, because you will be models to the rest. Yesterday, we had one of these meetings in New York, and some of the people there were talking about using this to deal with health care in a completely different way. So what it does is it opens up all kinds of possibilities. Once you've tested the model, rejected the old way of doing it, then we can move forward in a much more agile way, and again, not wedded or weighted down by any old ways of thinking. So I commend you for what you're doing, and I'd love to talk to you more about it. Thank you.
Right down here.
Hi. My name is Mark Hannis, and I work with an organization called the Genocide Intervention Network. As you may know, the Harvard community has been extremely concerned about the genocide in Darfur, Sudan, and actually shown amazing leadership in it. And I'd like to know, what are you doing specifically to help end the Darfur genocide, and how are you going to ensure the $50 million that were cut to support the African Union peacekeepers from this year's foreign appropriations bill makes it into the next supplemental?
Well, I'm trying to keep my answer short, but I will say this. When I first came to Congress, almost within the first week, I met John Garang, Mickey Leland, who was a colleague of mine at the time, who actually died in Ethiopia on a humanitarian visit, introduced me to him. So I became interested in the Sudan issue, like in the first week we're there. My friend Martin Frost knew Mickey Leland. Did I say Edwards? Mickey Leland very well, and he was very interested in this issue. Our Black Caucus, our Congressional Black Caucus, has taken the lead on the Darfur issue. They worked very hard to try to get our country to declare it a genocide, and that was, as you know, you worked on that as well. That was a mountain to climb, and finally the Secretary did. We had some hopes when the peace process came together, and then, of course, Garang died, so there's uncertainty now. I have asked my colleagues to go with me to the region after the first of the year so we can get a current first-hand look at what is happening there. Your question is so important because this challenges the conscience of the world. We talk about different genocides in the course of history, and when they've happened, we bemoan them. We say never again, no mas, whatever it is, wherever it happened, and yet it is happening right now. And the government in Durang, the government in Khartoum is getting away with murder. They are getting away with murder. So I work actively with our Black Caucus, and we have a level of frustration about not making progress. When we're there, we also may want to go to Niger to see the hunger situation there, because the loss of life, whatever the reason, is tragic in Africa, but that it is perpetrated by a government, ignored by it, almost laughed off by it with impunity, is something that the international community should be outraged about. But it is a priority for us, and I congratulate you and thank you for what you are doing about it. I'd like to work with you as well on it.
Right down here.
Hi, Andrew.
I'm a junior at the college, and I'm from Silicon Valley, where an increasing number of science and technology jobs are being taken up by immigrants from India and China and else around the world. I was wondering if you could comment on the role of immigration in either helping us innovate or whether it's a challenge for us to deal with, and how the Democratic Party plans to deal with it.
In terms of students, or you're talking about people taking jobs who are from India and China. Let me just back up for a moment and say this. Right now, we have a situation because of 9/11 and some initiatives that were taken on the war on terrorism, where it's very difficult for foreign students to get visas to study in the U.S. This does, I don't think, any good for our national security or for the education of our children. I think it's our young people. I think it's very important for us to have the intellectual stimulation of people from all over the world in our classroom. So many of us in the Democratic Party believe that we should be more discerning in how we exclude people and make sure we have the vitality and the dynamism in the classroom that is good for our students as well as the visiting students. When some of them receive the education here, we have considered putting forth an opportunity for them to be able to stay here to work in the United States. Although our 100,000 initiative is about American students. This is what the entrepreneurs, the venture capitalists, the small business people have told us, the academicians, that they need, that we need to make a special effort to increase the number of U.S. engineers. In the absence of that, yes, they will hire people from overseas. But we're trying to get over some old arguments about trade, about outsourcing, about immigration, and just say, let's just go out there and be number one ourselves, have our homegrown scientists and the rest, but understand that the vitality of the classroom is very well served by foreign students in our midst and by foreign workers in our midst as well, if we don't have the supply of engineers, mathematicians, and scientists that we need to be on the cutting edge of innovation. Thank you, Matthew.
Right up here.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Pat. I'm a first-year Master in Public Policy student at the Kennedy School. The agenda that you've laid out seems like it has a lot of potential to propel America forward. But I'm wondering how you propose to ensure that it has an impact also on America's poorest and doesn't leave them out of the benefits of the initiative.
Well, that's why when I keep talking about universal broadband, because you can't have universal broadband unless you include all of America's children. It's important for their education, it's important for their family's economic success, for the jobs that it creates and the jobs that they can access. So the digital divide, or whatever we're calling it these days, is a reality, and it will leave children behind. Central to doing any of this is to fully invest in initiatives like Leave No Child Behind, to invest in our Title IX for children in disadvantaged areas. Because the disparity of education, of course, leads to disparity in income, disparity in health care, and it just perpetuates a bad situation. So it isn't good for the people and their individual self-fulfillment and meeting the needs of their families. It's not good for our country. So the education piece of this is very, very important, and the broadband piece to lift up people who are of lower economic means. On our small business initiatives, to create a climate for small businesses, very strong initiative for women, minority-owned businesses as well. Not that we're talking about the poorest of the poor there, but to, again, have the fullest participation of all people in America in the prosperity that we want to build for the future. But we cannot go forward wisely unless we go forward together. And so we believe that this initiative for innovation, it's only a piece. What this will be part of is our fuller unified message that we're working with the Senate, the governors, the mayors, the state legislators, all Democratic, for a unified Democratic message, and it'll go into some other issues. But this economic piece for the future, to create jobs, to keep us number one, we think will lift everyone up. And again, the first layer of it is the education of all of America's children and fully funding No Child Left Behind, or whatever version of the story there is, to make sure that all children have the same opportunity. Education is key to everything. It defines every child's future, And unless we're willing to make that commitment, which we haven't been, we're over $40 billion behind in our commitment, the federal government is, to No Child Left Behind. $40 billion behind while we're giving $70 billion in tax cuts to the wealthiest people in our country. It's just not right. But thank you for your concern about the poor.
We have time for just 2 more questions.
Hi, I'm Chia Mustafa. I'm a first-year student. As a Kurd from northern Iraq, I admired your position on Saddam Hussein's regime in 1998, where I quote, you stated, Saddam Hussein has been engaged in the development of weapons of mass destruction technology was a threat to the countries in the region, has made a mockery of the weapons inspections. You even went on to say the responsibility of the United States in this conflict is to eliminate weapons of mass destruction, to minimize the danger to our troops and to diminish the suffering of the Iraqi people. Then why in 2003 did you completely switch your position, stand against the war, continue to stand against the war, and subsequently betrayed our people, when the only thing that's changed was an administration from a Democrats to Republican?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to respond to that question. First of all, as we all know, the intelligence on the weapons of mass destruction was not accurate. But it's a big difference between saying that a country, that the intelligence said, even though incorrectly, that there were chemical and biological weapons in Iraq, and saying that there's an imminent threat to the safety of the American people and that we had to have a preemptive war to go in. So while I am very unhappy about the intelligence that was not accurate that we received in the late 90s, nowhere in the intelligence in the year 2003, or 2002 is when we took the vote, no time in that, at any time, did the intelligence say there was an imminent threat to the United States that would be a cause of war. There was plenty of opportunity for us to find out if those weapons were there without going to war under the UN. And as I said, Senator Graham on the Senate side did not support the war either because there was not a threat to our country. It's one thing to talk about intelligence about what could be there. It's another thing to say we have to make a preemptive strike in a war of choice against a country that poses no threat, imminent threat to our country. And now we are 2.5 years later, no weapons of mass destruction, over 2,100 dead, 10 more today, over $250 billion in taxpayers' money. The cost in dollars is secondary to the cost in lives, but also the additional cost in reputation around the world. This war is a grotesque mistake. It is not making the American people safer. It is not making our military stronger to protect us from other threats, and it is not bringing stability to the region. There is a way out. Mr. Murtha described that. Some may agree with that, some may not, but almost everyone is saying we have to have some kind of a formula to bring our troops home safely and soon, and another way to bring this to an end. Otherwise, we're going to be there for 4 more years, 10 more years, 25 more years. We do not have the troops to sustain the level of commitment that it would require to stay there in perpetuity unless we have a draft. Is anybody up for that? So I appreciate your question. Yes, I made that statement on the basis of the intelligence that we had, but nowhere did I say, nor did the intelligence say, that there was an imminent threat to our country. Any other question?
My name is Linda Braun, and I'm an interested citizen. And first, I do want to thank you for being a clear and articulate voice for what you believe is right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
In your talk, you said that our newest technologies had to advance our most cherished values. I would like, if you would, to articulate what you believe are our most cherished values, and if you think they are universal, and if they're not universally held, then how can they be promoted?
Thank you very much for your very thoughtful question. I believe that our cherished values were given to us by our founding fathers. As I mentioned, I'm always very excited. You can look at it on the dollar bill. On the Great Seal of the United States, it said, "A new order for the centuries." This is about democracy, about every person being created equal, and about opportunity being equal. And in a democracy, of course, education, an informed electorate being essential to us. So I would say that the values of our country begin with what was fundamental to us about equality. Equality in terms of respect and equality in that sense, but also equality of opportunity. Opportunity that is achieved through the education, the best possible education for every child in America. Opportunity to participate in prosperity for every person in our country. I think fairness is an American value. Fairness in terms of how people have access, for example, to health care. The disparity in our country among minorities and others in health care is just simply not the American way. I think that one of the values that we have is to protect our country. We talked about security earlier, but the American value that we were taught by our founding fathers was to balance liberty and security. They taught us very well that you cannot have one without the other. If you think you have security by shutting down on liberty, then that's not really about liberty or security. So I would say opportunity, I would say fairness, I would say the security, liberty part of it. I think that a very strong value of the American people, which makes us different, and Martin Luther King spoke to it slightly in his statement, more broadly in many of his other statements, and that is the sense of community. The sense of community, that we all have responsibilities to each other. That's what made America great. Alexis de Tocqueville, when he came to America, wrote back and talked about the sense of community that he saw in America. And he said, America is great because America is good. And that goodness demonstrated itself in how people treated each other. So I would say opportunity, fairness, equality, community. And I would also say integrity, honesty in how we deal, a high ethical standard of how we govern, how we relate to each other, how America functions. That sense of honesty, integrity is central to us, and it only can be, and technology helps achieve that through transparency. People know in an instant what's going on these days, and that's one of the beauties of technology. So I believe that technology can help in many of these respects to the extent that it advances fairness, and fairness also includes a certain kind of environmental justice as well, that everybody in our community has a chance for clean air, clean water, not because you're poor and live in certain neighborhoods should you bear the brunt of the energy needs of, say, the larger community. So fairness, technology weighs in so many different ways. But when you ask me about our values, I would say opportunity, equality, community, fairness, and honesty in government. And again, the security piece is central to everything, but that security piece has to be balanced with freedom as well. We have a magnificent country. Our founding fathers, they were such geniuses. They were young. Thomas Jefferson was 30 years old. Imagine writing the Declaration of Independence and what they said in it about all men are created equal, and the values that they put forth in the preamble to the Constitution: to promote the general welfare, to provide for the common defense, to start first and foremost, to form a more perfect union. I think the preamble to the Constitution is a great statement of values. I think some of what I named springs from that and lends itself to technology, helping bring the equality, community, fairness, and on integrity and transparency that I think people need. President Kennedy, it's my generation. I was in college then. when he was running for president, they asked him, I mentioned this at the Oval Office meeting earlier, Harvard Square to Oval Office, that when they said to him that he should be disqualified for running for president because he was a Catholic. And he said, he went to Houston, Texas, where they had a ministers' meeting, Houston, Martin, and at that speech he said, Martin's from Fort Worth, but he said, what church I believe in isn't important. That should only be important to me. What is important is the America I believe in. And that's where we have to come together as a country to agree, forgetting any partisanship. That has no place in anything. What is the America we believe in? And what sense of fairness, opportunity, community, et cetera, do we all agree that we would go forward on? And again, recognizing that technology is a strong force. How do we use that as a force for good? Again, to bring us together and to move America forward. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Leader Pelosi's on a very tight schedule. We are going to have a brief reception right here. She'll be there for just a moment and then has to catch a plane to D.C. But thank you all for coming. Have a nice weekend.